Hopefully you caught my video on all of the sources of rainwater that we could catch. Today, I'm going to talk about all of the sources, the plants and the trees and everything that actually consume water and figure out how much water we actually need. And I think if you saw the other video, you probably already got the kind of bottom line, but this will hopefully help you be able to figure out how much water you need for your entire garden. Okay, so here we see all the consumers that are in my backyard that are going to have a demand for whatever water source that I come up, or combined water sources. So what I've done is I've entered all of the trees. I've got the desert willow, the vitex, an olive tree, a grapevine, a pomegranate, and then I've just added a citrus tree, which is going to be one of the most demanding trees in my yard. Actually, it's the most demanding tree. And then I've got my veggies in a raised bed and then some in the ground. But I want to point out a few things. The natives are these right here. So I'm going to highlight the natives. I should probably put them in green. Let's do that. These are my native plants that are in my yard, and they are the lowest demand water users. So these numbers right here were developed, I got them from the Watershed Management Group in Tucson, Arizona. I believe they're different for every area, but I'm using these numbers for demonstration purposes. It's really to give us a good idea of what's going to need a lot of water. Do we even have anywhere near it? And do I just need to plan on continuing to turn on the tap to provide water for all of these plants? So these are the natives. Here are my trees right here. And you can see out of these trees, the citrus tree is by far the most needy, right? It's going to need the most water. I'll give that like a dark green. And then my veggies, which I'm going to give a yellow, just because I need a different color. Those are the highest demand out of all of the vegetation in my backyard. Those are going to require the most water. Now, this might vary depending on how much you have in the ground for the year. So let me just say that again. If you do not have something in the ground year round, you might not have the same demand per unit area. So per square inch or per square foot. This is actually a per square inch number that I convert into a foot over in here when I'm calculating everything together. So if you only grow for 3 months out of the year, you might still have this number per square inch, but you might only have it for 3 months out of the year. Like when I was in Montana, we couldn't grow more than maybe 4 months out of the year. So my annual number would not have made sense because this is for 300. This is a number that represents 365 days of watering, when really I could only grow anything for 3 or 4 months out of the year. So this is actually the total amount of water that I would need to provide. If you want to break that down or change it, that's why we do a per month calculation. So you can say, okay, I grow 6 months out of the year. Well, just take your per month calculation and multiply it times however many months you grow out of the year. And you might want to break it up in growing seasons if you have more than one growing season. So ideally, what would happen is you would have like a rainy season where you could collect rainwater, store it, and then have a dry season where maybe you would be using that water. So for example, we get here in Phoenix, Arizona, we get our water, our winter wet season would be January, February, March, and then we wouldn't get rain again until July. So I would collect water during those 3 months and then use it during the 3 months when I don't get rain. Now, that doesn't mean that I'll get enough to be able to supply all 355 gallons that I would need for this one raised bed. Or if you look at my backyard total, it's about 2,500 gallons. I would need a tank that would be able to catch 2,500 gallons And then I would need to be able to afford it, for one, have space for it, and then make sure I have a plan to distribute it. There's all sorts of factors logistically to having a tank this size. I have a use for it, which is the first thing, but do I have the space for it, and do I have the finances to be able to afford a $2,500 a $2,500 gallon, tank? So probably not. But when we look at how much water we collect, I'll show you how much is actually provided by rain, how much could be caught by rain, and then what I would need to supplement through just watering from my faucet that I pay the utility for. Actually, let's go through the calculation really quick. For my desert willow tree, for example, there's a square footage. So I expect that it was going to grow, I'm just estimating a 10-foot radius. It's probably going to grow bigger than that. But for the time that I'll be providing extra water to help it get established, this is probably the size that I'm going to do that until. And then after that, it's going to have grown roots out into where it's reaching out to my other water sources, where it's collecting rainwater, all sorts of things, so that I'm not having to have a dedicated water source just for this particular tree. So what I estimated was a 10-foot diameter, which means it's a 5-foot radius. So we have to calculate the area of a circle, which is pi r squared. So pi, and then that radius of a 10-foot diameter is 5. 5 times 5 times pi comes out to 79. Now, I might supply it for longer. It's going to need a year or two to get established. And I want to make sure it's a nice, healthy tree. But realize these are natives. They're super adapted to the environment. The soils, I'm nourishing these soils. So they're naturally going to be sending out roots far and wide to gather the nutrients that I'm providing in other places, to gather the water that I'm providing in other places. So that's why this particular number is so low. I don't have a plan or a need really for these natives that I'll have to extra baby them. Now, my olive tree is probably going to be along the same lines, only because I don't have any way to process olives. It really is there to provide shade. And it's kind of a gamble that it's going to provide enough shade for what I need it for. So we're going to see. Now, I also have a grapevine. And the reason the grapevine and the pomegranate are as small of an area as they are, you might be like, well, a pomegranate tree, why isn't that bigger? I'm actually espalier growing this pomegranate tree. So just like you would see a grapevine, how it grows along a vine, and it has like different levels that it grows outward, but in like basically a vertical plane. I'm doing the same thing to my pomegranate tree. I don't want a big shrub of a tree or a big tree growing out in all directions. I don't have a lot of shade for it, but I do have a shade in my vitex tree. My vitex tree is actually the shade for my pomegranate tree. So since I'm space limited, I'm growing vertical and I'm growing just outward as opposed to in a big circle. It's a strategy. It's more of an intensive gardening strategy, but it looks really beautiful. And so far it seems to be taking to it. I'm kind of taming it. So as it starts to continue to grow, I'll continue to shape it and pull it out along these lines. Citrus tree, I have some plans for my citrus tree. That's why I'm just calling it a citrus tree. This particular tree is only an orange tree at the moment, but my plan is to graft on lemon and grapefruit so that I will have one citrus tree and not multiple. So that took me buying 3 separate trees that I will then graft and have one tree. And I can kind of plan out the lemon doesn't need as much sunlight, so I can put that on the north side of the tree. Or I can make it look pretty and put maybe the lemon branches around the bottom. I don't really know. It's gonna be an adventure to figure out, and I will film that for you. I've never ever done that before, so we will be experimenting together. So that's why I ended up with one citrus tree, still high demand, but it's going to cut down my water usage or my water demand because I only have one citrus tree and not 3. So could you imagine needing another 1,000 gallons for every growing season? I don't even have space, I don't think, for a 2,500 gallon tank in my little backyard, much less something larger. So this was really a saver for me, and I'm trying to use as many strategies as like this as I can to be able to save space, to be efficient. If I want another fruit tree, what I want is either an apple tree with different apples so I can have a year-round harvest of apples, or I want to do a tree that produces like apricots and plums and nectarines or something like that. And I can buy those already pre-grafted that I can put in the ground. And then I just have one more fruit tree that I have to, figure out into my water budget, as opposed to trying to have 3 or 4 more fruit trees that I don't have the space for and I don't want to have to produce all of that water for. That would be a very expensive water bill, because as you'll see when I actually show you how much rain I can collect or that falls on the ground, I don't have enough to do all of those trees. That would be like another 10 trees for all of those things. The veggies, my plan is to have almost year-round growing, which means this number is going to be very representative. These gallons over here, probably very representative of what I'll need. And I can almost get away with that. I'm not really sure. I'm going to test it out this winter in the Phoenix area because of our warmer winters, but we still have frost. I still have to be concerned about that. So I'll either have to cover everything, or I'm not really sure. It depends on what I'm going to end up growing. I've got a few ideas. And then again, here we are down to natives that don't take very much. So what I was told was we don't even have to include these in the calculation because they're so small, low demand. They're natives. So they're super adapted to the rainfall that already happens naturally. But I put them in just so you could know that I've accounted for them and we can see that they need like a gallon a month. That's super simple. I can do that. Anyways, here you go. Here's what it looks like. I hope that this gives you an idea of how to tackle your consumers, to figure out how much demand you have for water in your garden. And that way you can start to figure out how to manage your water bill, how to manage your rain collection, and how to account for the rain that falls on the ground. And I'll talk about that in the other video that I'm doing, that's going to be talking about surfaces. All right, thank you very much for watching, and happy growing.